Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Hassan with another episode of the Influence Continuum. And man, oh man, I've been trying to get the next guest for about a year since his book came out. It was called The Breach, The Untold Story of the Investigation into the January 6th debacle. And Denver Riggleman, I'm so grateful for your willingness to come on to my podcast. I'm just going to read a little more on bio for my listeners to know who you are. But I read your book as soon as it came out, and it led to me going, oh my God, Ginny Thomas was saying all this QAnon crap, and I'd already analyzed QAnon as a cult, psyops and a cult. And then a friend of mine said, you know, you met her in 1986 at a cult conference. She had left LifeSpring. I was like, really? Oh, yes, I did meet her. And I met Clarence Thomas. That's right, in 1991. So we dug up the video and it went viral, Denver. Anyway, let me get back to you because you're the focus
Fantastic.
of this. And so Denver Riggleman supported advanced intelligence analysis and technical development programs during his over 2 decades as an intelligence officer, NSA advisor, federal contractor, research and development technology lead, and a successful CEO of support companies for the Department of Defense. A veteran of the global war on terror and multiple worldwide operations, he served with honors in the United States Air Force for 9 active duty years. Riggleman is a former member of the House of Representatives from Virginia's 5th Congressional District, which he represented as a Republican from 2019 to 2021, and the former senior technical advisor for the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. He is the CEO of Riggleman Information and Intelligence Group and co-owner of the award-winning Silverback Distillery, which you're into whiskey, if I remember.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. We make some bourbon and some rye whiskey for sure.
Okay, it's not my style, but I just think you're a very cool guy. Anyway, you live in Virginia with your wife and family. And I saw you recently, I don't know if it was on CNN or MSNBC, talking about the insanity that's happening in the United States with politics. And I was like, maybe he's ready to come back on. And I think you're the first former congressman that I've interviewed. So I'm very honored. Thank you, Denver, for...
Oh, I'm honored, Dr. Hassan. I'm honored to be on here.
So listen, as we're recording this, such undemocratic, such, chaos and disinformation is happening. You're an intelligence guy. This is your thing. What I loved about your book was that you got Mark Meadows' cell phone, you analyzed the heck out of it, and it was all that data that led to so many other revelations. So maybe let's go back to January 6th, but I'm happy to go anywhere you want in this interview, honestly. I think the public needs to understand from experts your take on things.
Well, no, I appreciate it. No, it's, before, I tell you, I wish, Dr. Hassan, we had his complete phone. The one thing that Mark Meadows did was fought the committee to gather his phone records. And the thing I've been trying to explain to people since the beginning is that the committee didn't have law enforcement authorities. It was a public trust investigation. But I tell you, I wish we had the ability to actually give him a warrant instead of a subpoena. But we did get a lot of phone records, right? We had about 38 million lines of data. But what he did give up were the text messages. And I will tell you, Dr. Hassan, at that point, I didn't know what we were going to see. I had not seen them yet, but when they did send the text messages that were not identified, they were only phone numbers and content. We knew Mark Meadows, but we didn't know the other phone numbers. It's just amazing to me that he would give those text messages up so readily based on what was in them. But it did seem like either fear or not realizing, or his lawyers not realizing what he was giving up, I think really was the roadmap or the Rosetta Stone, as I said in the book, or as I said before the book came out, really the Rosetta Stone to the entire investigation.
Right.
Because it allows to see the interconnective tissue right, of all the belief systems that were happening simultaneously.
Right. And in the world of forensics, because I'm involved with, expert witness stuff, having the actual data is it's so powerful.
It's so helpful to have the ones and zeros. And not only that, but the content that links to those ones and zeros. And, you know, doing telephony analysis for really 2 decades, but also all of the types of data aggregation that I did, or taking national data assets like stuff from maybe NSA or other agencies and combining that with information on the ground. To be able to use those skills after being in Congress as a Republican and then being on the January 6th committee was really not something I expected, Dr. Hassan. That was something that I don't know. Whoever would have thought that I would be in that situation where I know Congress so well, I knew the far right so well, I know how Congress works so well, but I also know data analytics, and I would say
Right.
looking at the situational awareness of how people are actually conducting themselves online or how they're using language to radicalize others.
Yeah, and I just want to, I guess, compliment you, but it's more than that. I just want to commend you, maybe the right word, that you put country over party. And you really put your neck out to say, here's what I found, this is what I learned, and we need to address the wrongs that were done. So thank
But I
you.
think well, thank you. No, it means a lot to me for you to say that, especially with your background and what you know. But I do think when you look at the entire committee, I think there was a lot of people who put their necks out. And especially the staff. There was a lot of unsung heroes on the staff that we're never going to hear about that did so much work. And it would absolutely, I would be offending the team that helped me, the forensic team that actually did the work and built those linkages and the way to make sense of over 30 million lines of data and call records or text messages or social media. It really was that team, and they didn't ask for any credit. I mentioned a couple of them in the book because
Yes.
I asked their permission. But again, they still haven't gone out. They haven't talked. They really are just American heroes. And again, never asked for it. Just did the work. And my goodness, those are the real heroes of this country, I think.
And for me, studying leadership and ethical groups and unethical groups, I again commend you as a leader for acknowledging your people who did the work, and not
They
just
did the
like,
work.
I did this, I need the glory and all of that. You really, you're a good model for, I hope, a lot more people to follow, please.
Can I tell you, Doctor, real quick, Steve, that, it's the word I and we, right? And, I had a great mentor. He was an old Air Force Special Operations Colonel. And I remember I was in Florida on the beach with him. It wasn't like it was on a bay. It's a weird story. Great place though. And I remember I was talking about, I was 30. I'd just gotten out as a captain. I'd started my own company, or I was about to. I was like, well, I can do this. I can do that. I can do this. I can do that. And I'm just talking. He goes, hold on, Denver. Hold on. He goes, anytime somebody uses I too much, I automatically don't want to listen to him. And, he's from Louisiana. And that one sentence right there, Dr. Hassan, probably affected me more than anything that's really, as far as mentorship in the military and after the military, is that I had remembered that when I was a captain or when I was an officer enlisted. But coming out, me trying to start companies or me trying to do these things, it wasn't I. It's never I. It's always a we, or there's a team effort or people that are behind you. What I found is that if you are a leader, you're actually usually leading people that are smarter than you in each specific discipline. And right, and that's really
a really good leader, is picking people who are smarter than you and not letting your ego get in the way.
Well, that I've been very successful.
Me too. I love to learn, and honestly, I didn't make my company Stephen Hassan, and Associates. I made it Freedom of Mind, because it's the cause that is what's important, not my name or me.
Amen. So but again, I really appreciate you talking about the committee and talking about the people who gave it up. But over 50 people on the committee, and then you had the people that were very brave that would come and testify also, like the Cassie Hutchinsons or things like that. So again, I think there's a lot of people who were a part of that, but sadly, I think where you're going to go, Dr. Hassan. Sadly, I don't know. Looking back now, which has been what, over 2.5 years? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
January 6th,
I think
21.
21. I think actually January 6th is more applicable today. More applicable today than even when the committee report came out, because I think 2024. I think they learned some valuable lessons in their coup-like activities that they can actually take into 2024.
Yeah, yeah, it's very disturbing. So I don't know how much you know about my background, but I was recruited into a front group of the Moonies cult in 1974.
Oh, I read about
And
you.
they selected me to be, because I am a good talker and I'm 6 feet tall and whatever. I had no power, but they had me in the room listening to the plans to infiltrate the government and how democracy was satanic and how we had to implement the theocracy to rule the world. And even one meeting where Moon said, when we take power in America, we will amend the Constitution and make it a capital offense
Wow.
for people who have sex outside of the Unification Church weddings. And
That's
I was a true believer. I thought this was God's will, and I didn't understand how my mind had gotten so hacked from who I was, my values, my background. And it was only a van crash and weeks away from the group, unplugged from the constant indoctrination and sleeping, and then seeing my sister and then meeting ex-members and wanting to prove to them I wasn't brainwashed, and I wanting to prove to them I wasn't in a cult. So I agreed to listen, and by the end I was like, holy mackerel, this is a version of Chinese communist brainwashing that I was put through.
it seems like I was raised LDS. You read my book, right? I was raised Mormon, and it is nothing. It's not even comparable, right? As far as the severity of what you just discussed and how you got on the cult, right?
I've actually forgotten that part of your book. So
Yeah,
that's relevant because a lot
yeah.
of people
So
in intelligence and in the law enforcement community are Latter-day Saints.
they absolutely are, and me, I left, and that's been something that I think has been difficult at times for my family, but also for friends, that were close to me. And it's not like I'm telling you that LDS or Mormonism is some kind of dangerous cult. I don't know. I know your expertise is up there, but the people that I really still deal with in the LDS Church, I love them. Right,
Great people. And I
great.
have, business associates and such who are Mormons, and I never try to talk anyone out of their involvement. I do want to confess that I went to Salt Lake City for 5 days earlier this year and hung out with my friend, excommunicated psychologist John Dolan, and did a bunch of interviews for his Mormon Stories podcast, did a workshop with him, and I learned a ton. And there's a lot of suffering people who grew up LDS, like really suffering.
I remember I went to seminary every morning, at 5 or 5:30 in the morning, and I certainly remember I asked some questions that were uncomfortable because I was sort of a voracious reader, and I remember there was one time where a church leader told me that me reading books outside of really what was agreed to, or books against the Mormon religion, really amounted to a form of apostasy, right? Me as an apostate, because those books were written in a spirit of destroying the one true church. And that's, and spiritual warfare, putting on the armor of God, all that was sort of drummed into me, since I was baptized at 8 years old. So
8 years
for me,
old, that's a little young for our listeners.
My parents converted when I was 5, I think in 1975. I'm 53 now. So, but my wife and I actually got married in the temple in 1994 at the DC temple. But even then, my wife had actually come into the church with me because she loved me. And I remember we had discussions where she's like, honey, she had an outside view, like, I love you and stuff, but there's some issues here. And I'm like, well, I'm well aware of the issues, but faith. And I think by the age of 26, 27, I started looking I'm like, hey, this is just, I don't know. I went to UVA. the Military Seminary, University of Virginia. I wanted to be a theology major. And I think what I started to see is, and then I started reading. I mean, I was always a big reader, but once you start reading the Joseph Campbells or, things like that, you start to say, well, I think, and I already had the doubts from the age of 10,
I bet.
based on some of the questions I was asking. And I think all of a sudden it wasn't, a lot of people say, well, it seemed like a long time. Well, I would say by the age of 20, even when we were married in the temple, I was like, what am I doing here? I think by the age of 24, 25 to 29, I think you saw me like sort of go off the cliff away from LDS. But by 1999, 2000, it was sudden. Like, I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. And I hate to be that way. Like, I don't want to use the word ridiculous about a whole faith and incredible people. But to me, the tenets of the religion were so unbelievable and unfathomable that it was tough for me to even think that my belief system, or I could suspend disbelief, to do that any longer.
Right. Well, I'll just say that I was approached by the attorney generals of Utah and Arizona to do a training about the FLDS, the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. Warren Jeffs in jail. I was on Dr. Phil helping two 15-year-olds who ran away and didn't want to marry 60-plus-year-old guys. And then I got an invitation by the Ex-Mormon Foundation in 2000 to come to Salt Lake City. And I'm like, why would you want me to speak there? FLDS is a cult. You're not a cult. You're a religion. They're like, just come and we'll chat and we, present your bite model. So I did. And I had 250 ex-Mormons, many former fifth generation, fourth, fifth, sixth generation Mormons. And as I'm talking about brainwashing and the Moonies and China, the bobbing heads in the audience, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. But the thing that really flipped me was the fellow who spoke after me did a talk. He had been a professor at their training institute, and his talk was called Deception as a Management Tool of the LDS Church. And he started with Joseph Smith and lies from him, and he ended up with a recording where he was talking with his superior saying, so you're telling me I have to lie to my students in order to continue to teach here? And the guy said, yes, that's correct. And he said, well, I quit. But by the end of that thing is like, I have to learn a lot more about this organization.
Yeah, I think that's what has given me a bit, not just the data, right?
Hi, doggy.
Hey, doggy. It's not just the data. It's the fact that I think I'm a little bit more empathetic, to the evangelical bent and things like that. But on the other hand, I'm always fighting, Dr. Hassan, between being empathetic and being enraged. And a couple times I've really had to ask for apologies when I see something so ridiculous, it's automatically me taking a baseball bat. And I've even done it on social media where I'm like, somebody's got to see how ridiculous this is. But instead of bringing them closer to me, it seems like I push them away even further. And I know that would have happened to me if I was still active in the Mormon church. If somebody said, you're not the one true church, Joseph Smith isn't the one true prophet, I'd say, you're an apostate, you need to come to the one true church, right? You need to actually take some meetings from the missionaries. Right. That's what I would say. Right. And so I get it. But on the other hand, it's always this balance between being empathetic and just being angry. And I think it's just a weird way to live.
So I'm going to put my therapist hat on, even though I want to get back to your expertise in January 6th. But I would urge you to think about being compassionate rather than empathetic. Because when you're doing empathy, you're stepping into the person's shoes.
Right.
And you grew up there.
I did.
Versus all of you is now out, and you can have compassion that you could have been like that person the way they're talking. But there is an empathy trap where people are lose their own boundaries, their own values, and when something is really harmful or really wrong, anger works, to righteous indignation, like how dare they lie or how dare they invade the nation's capital and say it was a tourist
Oh,
experience. Like, come on.
Andrew Clyde, which I couldn't believe,
Yeah.
it just, you're right. And I appreciate that. I really do appreciate that. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's compassion there, but again, you're right about stepping into their shoes. You can get a little bit sideways and then, yeah, it's been a trip.
So
It's been a trip
I'm
since I started
forgive
this.
me. I just have to ask you this one
Sure.
question because it's been a real source of potential dissonance for me. So Mitt Romney was a bishop. He ran for the Republican, presidential position, and then he voted for the impeachment one thing with Trump, and the LDS Church turned on him. And I was watching, like, he'd get on a plane and people were booing him and treating him horribly. And I had to, say I want to. And he had written before Trump even was nominated that this is a con man, like he had done all of that before. But at the point that the organization turned on him and he was so prestigious, it just never made sense to me. Do you have any insight into what that's about?
I really don't. I mean, and looking at Mitt, he's at times he seems to have so much courage, right? And then, and he's not a stupid man. I mean, Mitt's a very intelligent man. I still find it interesting. I will tell you, even if I had, it maybe wasn't the whole LDS church, maybe it was a segment or people that did turn on him, maybe outside of it. But I do think that if I had anybody in the LDS church, right, at any position of authority saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't have voted for impeachment for Trump, or maybe you shouldn't have done that. And I was there, right? I voted against it, twice in my first term, right? And, following party lines,
Yeah.
right? And so I get it. I get both. And that's what's been, because even when I remember being down the floor and I'm like, man, because I read the Mueller report and, I'm getting besieged, right? You got to follow the line. You're already down. Denver, you already believe in marriage equality, so you're already screwed. So you better vote this way. The crazier people are gonna beat you. Boy, I could go into that, Dr. Hassan. It would blow your mind. The decision tree of how you go down the slope of giving away your conscience, right?
This is your time. I just want to make sure we have enough time to talk about January 6th, but I think this is fascinating to talk with a former Republican congressman who lived history and is saying, I was following the party line because I didn't want to, buck the system. I was getting a lot of pressure. I wanted to be reelected, whatever.
Yeah, I would have been the only one on the House floor, right? And I had already told people it felt very slimy. But then you rationalize, well, it doesn't reach the impeachment factor, right, or that threshold based on the Mueller report,
right,
and based on Barr, and and I thought it was very political. There are some issues on the other side too, and I can go into that at some point. But the real issue here for me is that I had already done so much to buck the system, even at the beginning. People are like, Denver, you're already down the line. I mean, this is a guy who joined the Climate Change Caucus and believed in marriage equality and legalization of marijuana.
Oh, I knew I liked you, but I didn't know all of these positions that you had taken.
So, I mean, I'm a Republican doing this, and like, you bet, dude, you're done already if you don't do this. And so there's these kind of things that you sort of, and that's why people said, well, Denver, why wouldn't you run for Congress again? I say, I don't know if I've learned so much. I would be a different person. But being a different person, if you're 100% down the line on integrity and you're not willing to give up some of your values or morals or some of your position points, it's very difficult to be elected. So I tell people that having 100% integrity and being elected in Congress is sometimes mutually exclusive.
Yeah, it's so sad. And we need to get dark money out for the left and the right. And we need to, get back to serving the public and thinking about our future and our children and our grandchildren's future.
Agreed.
So as we're doing this interview, there's so much craziness with Trump being charged with the documents, with politics, and that we almost defaulted on our financial obligations as a country, but thank God we didn't. But I really want to hear I want you to talk about what you found in your analysis for the January 6th committee, but I'm really interested in how that affects today? Because you said it's almost the same thing and worse happening today, or I don't.
Right. Well, I think I always say this, and people start to laugh. Right, Dr. Hassan. I say, past performance is usually indicative of future performance. Now, it doesn't have to be,
Well,
but
the
it is.
Bible says you know the tree by the fruit it bears,
But
right?
so there
So
you go.
to quote
So
that one,
then we could do that. We could do it, right. So I think the other thing too is there's another term that's so military, but it's something that it's how I think, and so and I'm trying to keep this, you know, not military and not
yeah,
weaponeering specific, but it's TTPs, right? It's techniques, tactics, and procedures, and how people actually execute a plan. And I think on January 6th, a lot of people say, oh, it was so stupid they couldn't have executed it. They were very close. And since I saw all of the data and I saw how they were using presidential executive orders to rationalize their behavior, how they were trying to manipulate all three branches of government, right? When you're looking at the political, looking at the executive, the legislative, and the judicial side, they had their legal strategy, they had their executive strategy, and they had their legislative
right.
strategy. But there was something sort of bounding that, and that was the militant strategy, with those that were being radicalized, right, through fundraising, hyperbole, digital and alternative media. So you're like, okay, January 6th, they failed, but I think the lesson was well learned, because when I sit in depositions, right, with an Enrique Tarrio or with a Bernie Carrick, there's now this sense that they can change it from the inside, that they can change it from the local and state levels, and they don't have to have this outward push, this sacking of the Capitol or this intimidation tactics from the president of the United States to really force that party line. I'm bringing it full circle to
Yeah,
voting the party line.
yeah,
And when you talk about 139 congressmen, right, actually voted to object to the electors and 8 senators, you're talking about 147 actually voted that way after the January 6th violence. And I know people maybe remember this when they said, like, oh, yeah, but they've forgotten. January 6th is stored in the rearview mirror. But I guess what I'm saying about the data we're even seeing today, and I have seen it, the same people that participated in January 6th or helped coordinate it are the same people running for office now. And they're also the same individuals that are supporting that individual running for office.
yep,
And you really haven't seen a whole lot of accountability to people like the Bernie Carricks, Rudy Giuliani's, the Sidney Powell's, the Alex Jones, the Roger Stones, the Mike Flynn's, right? Those people, even though everybody thinks there's something that should happen, they really are still moving down that path. And I think they figured out better ways. They've changed their TTPs,
yeah,
where I believe 2024, they might even be more effective if we're not looking at how they're doing things. And just fortunately, I was able to see all the separate groups in the data that were talking to each other, right? And that really gives me insight, I think, that other people don't, because I've seen more metadata. My team has seen more metadata and call records than anybody in the country, maybe besides the FBI and what happened that day. And I think that's the unique insight, is that they were able to have rally planners working with the Trump family, working with Trump associates, working with DOJ charged defendants, working with the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, working with state legislators, working with alternate electors, and that whole bunch, that whole mass was actually connected with specific individuals and groups that were able to coordinate those activities. That's command and control. That's what happened on January 6th. We know it was much more coordinated than people like to think. And I think they've really learned a lot of lessons going into 2024.
yeah. And as I learned when I was researching the cult of Trump, the New Apostolic Reformation churches and megachurches, which has 40 million, 50 million Americans, and something like 950 million worldwide, this is not Christianity. The media is misrepresenting that this is evangelical Christians. These are authoritarian cults where people are saying the opposite of what we started with. I am a prophet. I am an apostle. I can get revelation directly from God, and you have to be blindly obedient to me, and I'll protect you from demons invading you, and I can cast out demons. And they're the ones who said Trump won the 2020 election. And for them to say, oops, means that they're not a prophet and they should be stoned according to, the Old Testament or the Torah, right? So,
I,
and then now there's a
you're right.
schism happening with NAR. Some that are sticking with he really actually won, and then the others are going, I'm not so sure. Everybody said that there's no evidence that he won.
You're on top of it. When you're talking about the NAR and you're talking about, like the Reawaken, was it the Reawaken America tour with Mike Flynn?
Yep.
It's so funny you just mentioned that. I was just watching the MAGA prophet, the brawl, right? Where you have some prophets saying the other ones are false prophets, right? I'm like, this is unbelievable. And people are actually taking sides on this sort of this apostolic, cage match,
Yeah.
right? When it comes to Trump. But it's funny you said 40 to 50 million people. I saw that poll, the press, I think the press really is a bit clueless.
A lot clueless, and they won't
So
have me on. It's really
I was,
interesting that,
Steve, I was,
they talk about
they
the
should,
cult of Trump all the time, but why have the guy who wrote the book?
well, why would they have you on there when they can have a Mark Short who worked for Pence, or they can have one of the Trump's lawyers that helps them with clicks and money?
Right.
And that's one of the things I've been talking about is that there are some good people in the media. There's some great journalists who've done great work, but I think if you're looking for ratings, you really do you throw some cold water on their Trump ratings, Dr. Hassan. So I'm sorry to tell you, you're.
I just want to preserve our human rights and sanity for the public, but
Well, it's noble,
yeah,
and you probably have seen more in the cult side of things than maybe damn well probably anybody in the country, right? If you think about your experience and where you came from, and that is so invaluable.
and I've had a lot of help. I want to thank all of the people who've taught me about the dominionists, the Seven Mountain Dominionism of
Seven
Lance
Mountains.
Wallnau, and people are like, oh, Mark Burnett was in charge of the media, and he did The Apprentice.
Yes.
And and connect the dots. They want to take over. Like, this is a plan to take over.
Did Mark Burnett do Survivor also?
Yes, and Shark Tank and a few
And
other
Shark
things.
Tank. And by the way, it was season 32 contestant Anna Kate who was the one who talked about Obama and Biden killing SEAL Team 6. That's what actually got me sideways. Look at that transition, Steve. That's what got me sideways with my own family, but got me completely sideways with the party when I came out against Trump and QAnon when he retweeted the Obama-Biden conspiracy theory that they killed SEAL Team 6 on some kind of odd deal with Iran because we actually killed Osama bin Laden's body double. That was Anna Kate. She was season 32 of Survivor, I believe is who she was, right? And I got to tell you, the fact that you just said all that, and that's why I love having these conversations, is people can understand the progression of people that are in this sort of big ecosystem of nuttiness. But just because they're crazy doesn't mean they're stupid.
Oh, exactly. Or that their minds got hacked and they think that
Yes.
they're making their own decisions, as I did when I was a Moonie. But all my family and friends were like, this is not the Steve that we know, the poet who liked girls and played basketball and,
Yeah.
was working as a banquet waiter at the Holiday Inn on weekends while he was going to college.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, and it's scary.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not taking away from how scary that must have been for that realization to hit you like it did, but it's also fascinating that, you're obviously a brilliant guy, right? And I think what happens, even for me, people are like, well, these are a bunch of morons or ignoramuses. Well, I can tell you that I don't think Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene are very smart, but I'm not going to automatically apply stupidity honestly, to Kevin McCarthy or to anybody high up in the leadership chain in the Republican Party, because they absolutely know what their polling and fundraising is telling them, and they have to go down this line if they're going to get reelected. And maybe, God, I'd love to one day talk about that, is that, what makes you that person where no matter what, you have to get to that portion of leadership. And that takes a lot of ambition, takes a lot of motivation. I think it also takes a lot of sort of selling pieces of your soul off as you roll up those type of ladders.
So I'm going to just go back to the cult of Trump and say that he was raised in Peel's church and the ideology of the power of positive thinking, where if you doubt, it's satanic, it's evil. So you should only have positive thoughts about everything. that connects the dots with all these prosperity ministers who are like,
Yes.
believe that you can be a millionaire and you will magically be a millionaire. In the meantime, give me money for my third plane and my second Rolls Royce. And people are forgetting Jesus said, no, take care of the poor and the sick. Not rich people ain't gonna get to heaven. They forget all of that, right? But it's that greed, the power, money, fame, deception away from real core values and principles.
They forget that scripture with the camel and the eye of a needle or something
Yes,
like that, don't they?
it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. It may be a mistranslation with the
They
camel,
should,
but the idea is understandable.
right.
And but there's so many directions I want to go with it. I do want
You
to.
go anywhere you want
I
to
want
go.
to
I'm
ask
ready.
you: have you heard of fourth generation warfare and William
course.
Lind?
Of course.
Please
I
tell
even
me
heard
what you know about it, because it was a revelation for me. And a Stanford PhD who did his doctorate on William Lind and this actually analyzed March 6th on my podcast 2 months
March 6th
after.
or January 6th?
January 6th,
January-
sorry. He
No.
came on March 6th, but it was January about, and he's a intelligence analyst who knows fourth gen, and he said this was a military operation. This was a formation. This was all planned, and he was spot on. But
Yeah,
tell us about William Lind, and who met with Trump, and Paul Weyrich and the Christian right.
Well, and you can also talk about Mike Flynn's fifth generation, right?
Yes,
look,
which is
right,
QAnon.
Oh gosh, I love this stuff. I apologize, but I think
don't apologize. I love it too. I'm so honored to have this opportunity and to share our.
Oh, this is great. I think when you talk in fourth generation warfare, I told somebody the other day, and I think you're going to really appreciate this. I said, people talk about the forever war that happened in Afghanistan and things like that. I said, information warfare is the forever war. So you're talking about combining different effects in the battle space, right? And you're combining them in a simultaneous push, right? And it's really the best way that I can say this. It's a combination of non-kinetic tactics and kinetic tactics, right? So, and so you're talking about, levering or radicalization through certain types of platforms, making sure that you're using, the best way I can say it is decentralized control, right? Where people know their tactics, where there's not a direct line of, command and control, but they actually know what tactics they need to do, right? But simultaneously, they're also pushing specific types of information out into the ecosystem, right? To make an effect, not only for fundraising, right? But actually to affect movement on the ground or affect movement in the digital space, right? To affect movement in the political space. And, when I talk, when you talk about the generations of warfare, which we had to learn in intelligence training and things like that, I think when you see individuals talking about fourth generation and then and again, I say crazy, not stupid, but the individuals that seem to be part of, and I'm just going full circle back to you, by the way, Steve. When you're talking about the NAR, and you're talking about Reawaken America, and you're talking about Flynn, and you're talking about the Christian nationalist push, and those have self-identified like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and the fifth generation side, I think what they're trying to do is trying to go from first, second, third, fourth generation types of combination of information operations and physical activity. I think they're pushing into, hey, we got to do some more stuff, right? Now we have to it almost seems to be almost a nationalistic push, right, to get people into the sphere of digital soldiers and digital warriors.
Yep.
So I hope that helps.
No, I think it's also international. People are saying there's popularist, movements around the world, Bolsonaro and of course Putin and Xi, but there's a lot of NAR people around the world, and I think this is an international conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy theory. They're actual people who have left and outed it. And we know about the Council for National Policy. I just want to say two more things about fourth generation warfare for my listeners. It's aimed at creating chaos and distrust in experts in science, in institutions, so that people are so disoriented that they can be influenced by an authoritarian that comes in with certainty and repetition over and over and over. I got this. I know this. Blah blah blah. Um, and the solution, as I understand it, of fourth generation warfare is explaining it to everybody. Like this is not just happening spontaneously.
And I should have gone further. Information warfare, when I'm talking about that, is destabilizing, right? And it's you're right about this complete distrust in anything that has expert or data or doctor, right? Even somebody like me, I remember I was in my distillery, and we've had hundreds of thousands of people come through there in 9 years. And I actually have people that I've known, Steve, for years. And I will tell them down the line, here's what happened. And because they asked me,
Yep.
said, do you want to know?
Yep.
Yes. And I am compassionate, right? I tell them what's going on. And they said, well, I had one guy and I wish somebody could have been there with me that understood what was happening. One of the most incredible men. He has a gay son. He completely loved that I did a same-sex wedding. 100% supported me. And I go through the data streams of why there's a certain people underneath of Trump that were very responsible for what happened on January 6th, that it was not just some random, that's what he asked. He goes, wasn't this just a bunch of people who gone nuts? No. So I went through all the data lines, and he said this. And then I don't care if people say, I don't care what they say. I don't lie about it, straight up. He goes, well, are you telling me his favorite show, which I found at that point was Tucker Carlson, are you telling me that this Patriot Purge thing isn't real then? And I almost did not know what to say. I said, not only, my friend, is it not real, right? It's fabricated on a level that's hard for me to even define. And he said this, well, then who do I believe? Why would I believe? I don't know. I don't see your data. I don't see what you see. I don't see what he sees. So really, you're just saying the same thing from the opposite side.
So you want to know what I say?
Yeah, I'd like to know.
I take a scientific kind of thing that I'm willing to change my mind based on evidence and on data. And when it came to the vaccine for COVID, I said, honestly, I don't know all the science, but I have a very close friend for 20 years who's at Children's Hospital. She got her PhD at Harvard School of Public Health. And when she takes the vaccine and she says it's safe, I'm going to take it. Because I know Elisa. I trust Elisa. Go to people that you actually know in real life, because there is a certain act of faith, but you also want to combine it with an expertise in a particular area.
Beautiful.
That is happening. And I'm going to add, there's a book called The Knowledge Illusion, Denver, by two cognitive neuroscientists, and they basically showed that people walk around thinking they know how things work, but when they're actually asked to explain, like how does a toilet flushing, how does it actually work when you press the lever? They can't explain the science. But they said what we do as human beings, we're community based. We're part of a bigger community. So when we need to know something specific, we go to experts and look for information. And what is so destructive right now is people will go online to Google or whatever, and they don't know how to analyze the trustworthiness of sources.
Oh, gosh darn it, you beat me again. The only thing that I could say is, like, do you trust a vetted source who's done this for 20 years or a Tucker Carlson? That's all I could say, right? Right. And you just, the fact that you went to the doctor, I'm like, oh, man, he's already ahead. Steve's already ahead of where I was going to go on sourcing. Because the only thing I ask people is that when you look at my past performance for sourcing and what I'm willing to say I'm wrong about or right about based on data, I've been pretty good. when you go to Tucker Carlson, nothing he says is correct. That's been proven, right? We know that.
Yeah.
We already know that through court cases. We know that through actual legal sourcing, that there's real issues with Tucker Carlson sourcing himself, or that his ability to lie or is admitting to lying.
Right.
So and so when I even say that, again, there still seems to be this pushback from people that are center right to far right, that somehow me as a former Republican, there's something must have happened to me to where I think that the Republican Party all of a sudden is in a hold my beer moment. Right. And I think that's pretty interesting to watch the look on their face. They're like, well, Denver, you voted for Trump. No, actually, I didn't vote for Trump, my friends. So they're like, oh, so it's just a really interesting dynamic as I'm trying to pull them into me and get them close and hug them, a little bit.
Yeah.
I know what data I'm sourcing.
And real friendship goes beyond beliefs or, ideology.
Yeah,
And
absolutely does. Still love the guy.
I've been saying to people, don't, if you've blocked people or haven't talked to people for years, just call them up and say, I miss you. I want you in my life. And then if they say, well, you called me bad names, and you say, I'm sorry, I really, value you and I want a do-over. Like, what can I say that you will accept? And just start with real life, and don't think that followers on the internet are equivalent to real friends in real life.
Amen. That is, you can say that every day. I don't think people can hear that enough. That is absolutely brilliant.
Well, people need to be realigned to values and common sense and golden rule. Like, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. Don't, if you see somebody treating someone badly, ask yourself, would I want to be treated that way? Or what if they were treating my mother that way or my sister that way? Would I defend them? Damn right I would, right? So
damn right.
It's
damn right. And no, and that's and what you're saying about reaching out and connecting with people, being compassionate and how you're approaching this, I think does lead into the future, because I think we're going to have these arguments up until November of 2024. And I think there's going to be people who really are nefarious in action, or have nefarious, I would say, motives.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that they're leveraging people who aren't bad people at all, but they're utilizing them almost, or weaponizing them to do things based on an apocalyptic belief system, or it's good against evil.
Yep. All or nothing, black and white, us versus them. Very low on the developmental scale, by the way. Back to childhood.
Yeah. Looking to lack of nuance.
Dad or mom. No, what do I do, dad or mom? And if you were raised in a family where you were corporally punished, you're going to be more likely to follow an authority figure who says obey. And that's the opposite of healthy parenting, where you want to encourage your child to grow up to be themselves, even if it means they don't follow your exact belief system or religious orientation, but that they're good people and that they're responsible people.
Well, that's, again, I just feel very proud, of what I was still a pretty strict dad as a military dad, and still coming through that whole transition. And my wife, God love her, I said 9 years of active, but I was 2 years in college going through ROTC. So it was 11 years of me being more or less separated from my family as I went to college and I worked, or I was deployed, or I was in war zones, those type of things.
Right.
But I think we do have 3 daughters that have really sort of bloomed with their own paths and their own belief systems and what they need to do. But I will tell you, being the oldest of 8, right, there definitely were control mechanisms put on me that probably today would be, looked at sideways, right?
Yeah,
tough,
for sure.
Right. And I just feel very fortunate, Dr. Hassan, that
just call me Steve.
Well, I know, but it's I feel very fortunate that I've been able to serve in multiple capacities and still be here, and even despite mistakes. And I think it's really learning how to sort of separate yourself from people who say that they know what's best for you, and then understanding that sometimes the people who say they know what's best for you are the people that are actually leading you down a path to destruction. And I just want people to be able to sort of open up and see those who have purposes that are completely opposite to what they're telling you, because they're grifters, sociopaths, they're smart enough to manipulate you, or they're true believers,
Or they're
that
state
think,
actors for
or
our
they're state actors.
enemies.
Oh, and let me tell you, that'd be another podcast, my
Well,
friend.
we'll have to do it again.
Yeah, we would. But yeah, again, I think seeing January 6th, to bring it full circle, I think my biggest fear is that January 6th is going to be repeated in a way that we're not ready to be flexible enough to react to it, because we're still afraid to look at it in a way that needs to be looked at. And we still need another year. We need another year or two with the data to see how many actual actors were involved. But that data was taken from me, right? The committee went to the archives, the data sequestered, and it's encrypted. And I know that it hasn't probably come back out for study. And I think at some point we have to take those 30 million plus lines back out, and we have to really dig into every single way that they were connected, and how that tissue was actually able to coordinate on January 6th.
How do
What
we
we need to
do
do.
that? That sounds like an action item that we should put, to the public, that this is something that will help us in the future, because they are going to evolve and they're going to learn from their mistakes, and we have to be prospectively trained. I just want to add, my former cult has a gun factory that makes AR-15s. And the other one has a church that says, Revelation says that the rod of iron is an assault rifle.
Yeah,
And they have
I
two
saw that.
training compounds in Tennessee and Waco, Texas, because they want civil war in the streets. And what are we going to do to prepare? Because they are preparing for violent insurrection.
I think it's better that I think people putting their head in the sand is where people feel more comfortable. And I think believing that can happen here, even after January 6th, which should be shocking to everyone. I think they have put it in their rearview mirror, and there's no way that can happen again. But I promise you that the improvements that needed to happen in the security apparatus and the intelligence apparatus and the logistics apparatus, really, I don't think have been effective. And I don't believe that they've been made to a level where we could protect the Capitol or state Capitol buildings, or identify where that violence is coming from in real time. And there's always a balance between civil liberties, the First Amendment, right, and intelligence gathering.
Right.
But somewhere somebody has to find that line. And I think when you're talking about churches that preach that the rod of iron is an AR-15, or when you're talking about, I believe that, does your church, is it the Washington Examiner also?
Washington Times is owned by the Moonies.
Washington Times, right? So it's just amazing to me that we still have the majority of the public. I don't think that the danger is right there next to them or with them, or they're part of it and they don't know it. And that's my job. I might be spitting in the wind, Steve, but I'm going to continue to move forward and do the best I can.
Well, I'm with you. I want to talk some more with you, but I'll say that, sticking your head in the sand is a dysfunctional long-term strategy. It may be a good short-term strategy, but what works better is to have a plan that's actionable. You may not have the resources right now, the money or the people organized, but I've been saying for years, well, I wrote in the book, if he wasn't reelected, there'd be violence. And I quoted Jim Jones. I wasn't a prophet. I just have studied cult leaders for a really long time.
You have some expertise there,
I have
Steve,
some
right?
expertise, but the point is, I've been saying, well, we need to get a bunch of people together in a room,
right,
and really make a strategic plan that's going to be effective, not necessarily announce it to the enemies who are trying to take down our democracy. But
tell you, it sounds like the deep state, Steve. Sounds like the deep state.
Yeah, well,
Watch out.
we need to think clearly about what's actually happening. And, regarding the deep state, I would just want to comment, words that are thought-terminating cliches. That's one of the Chinese communist brainwashing tools.
Right.
So I'm against authoritarianism on the left and the right. I want, people to be diverse, have different religions, have freedom to choose. I support human rights, women's rights, gay rights. rights for people to not believe. Like if you're going to have freedom of religion, you have to have the freedom to not believe and be looked at with equal status, not be treated as if there's something wrong with you. That's another Chinese communist thing called dispensing of existence. This is from my mentor, Dr. Robert J. Lifton, whose book helped me get out, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, 1961. Dispensing of existence, it's in chapter 22. It says, if you're in the group, then you have a right to exist. If you leave the group, you have no right to exist. And that's cancel culture.
It is. It also sounds a little bit like basic training. A joke again, joke.
No, I think that there's, so I'm going to hold up my influence continuum. But controlling behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions.
That's right.
If it's done with informed consent, with the rule of law, if you're signing a contract, you're getting paid, you can exit with honor.
Right.
It's not the same as being in one of these extreme things, but you have to have something to be able to be a military person, carry a gun, and shoot at people.
I think that's part of it too, that, you're right about signing a contract and willingly doing something, with a mission that has a parameter set and there's an end date.
Yes.
That's sort of something too, right?
Totally.
But I think, the things that you're saying really are disturbing. And I think you're right about a plan. And, for me, so I got the book out. The left and the right weren't real happy. Data is powerful. Can make everybody mad. But I think what happened was I got called by certain people and movie producers and stuff to look at movies. But instead of, I'm going that route, but I think the other route that I need to go is, I don't know if a congressman's ever gone in and then come back out and started a company back into technical and intelligence analysis, which I've done. And, with people that really support me in a very niche area, and that niche area that I'm looking at really is domestic terrorism, radicalization, and really how to characterize that using technology, right? What are the centers of gravity where that's happening? And it's just, I saw the gaps in the J6 data, and I saw the gaps in the data that I'm doing now that I think is really tough for the U.S. government to identify, because it's very complex. But on the other hand, it also takes a unique set of skills. And I think a unique background in being raised the way I was. And that's really it. I mean, it's not rocket science for me. It's just looking at data, how people are acting, where they're putting that data, and what that cause is, and what their belief systems are as they move forward. And it's really interesting to watch that. So that's why I'm going to do my little piece and do the best I can. I'm one of, 340 million in the United States, Steve?
Yeah, but you're special. And honestly, I didn't understand that you didn't finish your job of analyzing, and that the data is sequestered and encrypted, and that there's more that we need to get out of that data. And to me, that should be a very highly publicized need.
There should be an executive working group that's identified immediately to look through all that data, because it's public trust data. Yeah. It doesn't have geolocation, it doesn't have civil liberties type of data in it, because Congress can only look at so many types of data. But it does have all to from data, and it has and it shows you every type of communications, whether it was VoIP, whether it was landline, cell phone, SMS, MMS, right? So it would be really valuable to anonymize that data, right? And to look at those groups without their specific names to see if there were group dynamics or functions that were happening. And I think we found a lot of that, but there's so much more to do with that amount of data. And then mixing that with social media data to see the people that were talking to each other on regular lines and how they were on to actual other virtual communications, or how they were actually discussing things on social media. That needs to happen.
Yep. And I can't end Denver without saying that Stuart Rhodes has been convicted of seditious conspiracy. Proud Boys are going to jail. I want Trump to be charged, and I want him to be tried, and all the other promoters who instigated all of these other people and gave them money and empowered them. Because in my doctoral dissertation on how to update the law for undue influence, there's the influencee and the influencer. And just punishing
Absolutely.
people without looking at who influenced them and holding them accountable, it's not going to work for justice either.
Not at all. You just can't have the line people, right? The poor saps, the 1,000 DOJ charged defendants as the ones that are accountable
Right.
for things that were done at much higher levels.
Right. And a lot of them said, I did it because Trump told me to. The president told me to. So he needs to be held accountable.
Sad state of affairs, isn't it?
Well, I'm going to keep saying it, and because he really needs to be held accountable. And people who are malignant narcissists will keep degenerating and get more dangerous and more dangerous over time unless they're stopped.
Well, that's why I'm going to keep going too.
Great.
And I'm not going to stop. And it just, again, your expertise, just having this conversation, I learned stuff today.
So I learned a lot too, but I'm going to go over just a few minutes and just say,
sure.
I want to ask you, say your speech to somebody who maybe is starting to surface some doubts about Trump and the 2020 election and is wondering about things. What would you advise them to do?
Oh, that's an incredible question. I think if right now, and I've had this discussion with a few people, so you probably know this. Usually how I start is pretty interesting, especially if I know the person. I'm like, do you trust me? Do you love me? Mm-hmm. Right? And I'm like, I'm going to tell you something. I said, there is nobody who's leading people, say it's like a President Trump, I would say the one thing I want you to take away is nobody should be inactive when other people are being harmed. And I say, I've done this for 20 years. I've gone after bad people and I've protected good people. I've looked at radicalizing language. I've looked at how people are actually weaponized. I've looked at what they say, right? How they change, right? And the one thing I would tell you, if you're thinking maybe this isn't for me, maybe I am having doubts about President Trump, would you follow anybody? Would you trust anybody that will allow other people to get hurt, right? And either not do anything, make light of it, right? Or actually encourage it or try to rationalize it after it happened. I said, if that's where you're at, if you think it was okay what happened on January 6th, I can't help you. But if you think that there's something horribly wrong about that many law enforcement individuals being hurt or people saying to hang a vice president, right, or the awful things they were saying about leaders based on fantasy, if you think there's something wrong with that, I humbly submit that maybe you should look at people that'll help you get to where you need to be.
Yeah.
And say, I will always be here if you need to phone me, if you need to call me, but I never lied to you and I never will. And if you're like, Denver's never lied to me and he served this country faithfully and he did things that cost him where he sacrificed because he thought he was doing the right thing, if that's what you think I am, I promise you right now, I am telling you the truth. And I will not lie to you, and I am here for you. And if you ever doubt it, I will show you the facts. Because data and facts is where we need to be. And that's how I would.
Very grateful. And you just mirrored my spiel, because I don't lie. And if I make a mistake, I acknowledge it. Or if I change my mind, I explain why I changed my mind. And I have a body of experience and then academic research and field experience helping people get out of all types of cults and de-radicalize them. So I'm going to tell you the truth. If I'm missing something, please give me information. Otherwise, it seems pretty clear that my theories, my models have substance and are worthy of you to really dig in.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. I absolutely down the line.
Well,
that is
I look forward to talking to you again. Maybe we can meet in person. And
love to.
I just really respect you. So thank you.
I respect you, sir. This was a great conversation.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye.
Bye.
Steve Hassan here. It's been decades since my family rescued me from the Moonies. I've been at this for over 47 years. The need has never been greater. If you're able, please consider hitting the super thanks button below, and it'll help us to do better. Every penny will help us toward our goal of educating the planet about undue influence. Remember, it's your mind, only you should control it.